So this is our veteran entrepreneur workshop. It's developing your business plan. And here's the responses. 67% of you are not in business right now, which actually helps us immensely in trying to obviously answer your questions here. This entire series is sponsored by Bank of America. Bank of America has been a huge supporter for us. And here's one more pop-up question as far as whether or not you have a business plan or are in process of putting one on. Bank of America has been a huge supporter of our Veterans Workshop series, and obviously is a huge supporter of veterans. And we thank them very much for doing this with us at this point. So what are we going to cover today? Both David and I are going to take different components of this, so you don't have to hear one of us on an ongoing basis. But overall, what we're hoping to do is give you the general idea of what a business plan obviously does for you. It should provide you focus. What do you want to do? What are the key factors in the timeline? And it basically validates your business idea, including the economics or the financials, if you want to call it that way. It helps you determine your financial viability, and we'll be talking about some of these component pieces. It also will help you figure out your structure. Obviously, are you a single proprietor, partner, corporation? Again, depending on what your thoughts are. And also talk about your competition. It gives you a roadmap to track your progress. I think this is critical for a lot. I have a client who constantly goes off on tangents from what we originally discussed or what she had decided as to be her business plan. And when she asked me, so Karen, is this a good idea? And I'm like, go back to your plan. And is your plan still what you want to do? And that brings up the last point. It's a living document. Things may change. Everybody doing business pre-COVID is very different post-COVID. So your environment, the way you do business changes, and your business plan has to reflect that. Some of the objectives of a business plan is you have to understand who the reader and who the user of it. If this is a plan you're using for yourself personally to keep you focused, that's one way to look at it. If this is a plan that you're looking in order to get financing and talking to a bank or an objective, that's another way of looking at it. So it goes back to what is your mission, and it should keep you focused. It should also allow you to communicate your ideas to your stakeholders, and stakeholders can be your partners, your employees, your customers. It should also set and allow you to achieve your milestones, which we'll talk a bit about. There are really two different types of business plans. The traditional one, which could be a little bulky, I've seen business plans that are 30 or 40 pages long. Yeah, no, I find those honestly way too much and unnecessary. I just saw a business plan that was 70 pages long, and I'm like, really? Who's going to read that? And all the time and effort. So a traditional business plan, which is a little bit more detailed, in my mind, is one that you put together, especially if you're dealing with trying to get a loan or investors. We're going to go through what we call lean canvas. It's a lean startup plan. They call it one page. It probably becomes 2 or 3 pages, but it's a very short version, very easy to write. And that's what we're going to focus today's time on. Some of the critical things you have to keep in mind, especially since based on the polling questions, many of you are thinking about starting up a business. 20% of businesses fail in the first year based on statistics that we have. 50% fail after 5. Only 1/3 of them are around 10 years later. So what you can be looking at is obviously some of the things that causes issues. One of them is running out of money. I frequently have questions when I start with a new client in which they think they could just start this. They have a couple of $1,000 in their account and they are just going to start this business. Well, it's a cost to running business, and we'll get into startup costs a little bit later on. So you need to and things always take longer than you expect, especially with obviously the supply chain issues we're dealing with, getting vendors if you need to obviously get a space fitted out. Your own experience in managing a business. You may be a wonderful technician. You may be a great carpenter, you may be a wonderful retail sales store person, but finances makes your eyes glaze over. Or marketing, not your forte. I just want to build cabinets, or I just want to do landscaping design. Understand that you need help. So those business owners who don't want to obviously delegate or obviously bring in somebody generally suffer because, again, you're the chief cook and bottle washer. Sometimes you need help. And then poorly planned or executed marketing campaigns. As a business, you're going to constantly be barraged with people saying, oh, you want to place an ad here, or you want to do this, or you want to buy this mailing list, or you need to understand what you need to get to the client that you want, which makes that business plan so important. And we'll be talking about how to focus on those going forward. What are the tips for a successful business plan? A story tells your market need way better than numbers. So again, talk about what you want, why you are the important person they should have in offering your product and service and as their potential source of information. Your forecast starts with specifics. You can't just say, oh, I need $5,000 and I think I'll be fine. Well, what's that $5,000 paying for? Does that include cost of initial staff, insurance, rent, leasing equipment? What is it like? Unit economics, or obviously, realistic expenses, that goes back to, I need to have 10 customers by X time in order to make this profitable. That's something to keep in mind with your business plan. Is this a business that is going to pay your rent and overhead? Or are you lucky enough to have a spouse or another that obviously their position or their income covers that, and you can take your time to build this business? It makes a very different business plan depending on what those two things are. Start with a narrowly focused product market, and let's talk about a landscaper. You may think you may be able to obviously do landscaping design as well as mowing and trimming and everything else. Think about what you want to do first. Don't do everything. Start with the small things. Develop your expertise, develop your client base, and then move from there. Set milestones for yourself and progress. Looking at, and this also goes back to the best validation of actual sales, is, okay, I want to have 10 customers and have made $5,000 by this date. If you don't, adjust. So not only looking at sales as your best validation, but the second thing is obviously letters from customers promising future business, or even more so, have them go on Google and give you a great 5-star Google review. Have them go on Nextdoor, and Nextdoor, for those of you who don't know, is pretty much a social media platform which is shared among neighborhoods, in which, especially down here, I'm in Bluffton, so we have a lot of new people moving in. So everyone goes on Nextdoor and says, oh, where could I find a doctor? Where could I find a landscaper? Where can I find whatever else? If you've got a good review on Nextdoor, it'll be amazing who runs to your doorstep. So here's the key component pieces, which we'll go through in a very, in some detail here, but obviously we have 3 more of these workshops, which will dive into them. One is, okay, is your concept make sense? What your customers need? Looking at your marketing plan, products, services, proposition, and going back into your financial plan. And does it make sense at the end of the day? Here are various websites that when you get this PowerPoint, they will be live links you can go to. I particularly like the B plan ones under the first set. So you can go into B plans and say, I want a business plan for a landscaper. I want a business plan for a retail store. I want a business plan for whatever. And it actually will show you a business plan and give you general ideas on what should go into those. We're going to go through the lean canvas model in this presentation, and that is where you'll find more detail on that when you go into that link on our SCORE website. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to David, and you just let me know when to advance the slides for you.
Real good. Thanks so much, Karen. Appreciate the introduction there. And I am glad to work with people, startups in the Lowcountry. This is my way of giving back to the community. So particularly for our veterans. My father was a vet, so Appreciate your service. But a business plan is really important to your business. And there's an old adage that if you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. So really getting started with the right set of metrics, the right set of customers, right understanding of your market and your product and the value that it creates, that's very important to get off on the right step. So I want to reiterate what Karen said. It is a living document and you're going to adjust along the way, but getting started with your initial objectives, keeping a narrow focus on the market, being able to communicate that's very, very important. This defines your priorities and very importantly, defines your successes. You're looking at your key objectives and celebrate when you achieve those objectives. So I'll cover the problem and solution topics, and then also your customer topics, and then Karen's going to handle the number side of that. Yes, this is called a lean canvas. If you use real small font, you can get it on one page, but usually it's a 2 or 3 page, 4-page document. And you just use these headers to jog your memory, to create information about your business in a very unique way. Each business is different. So you're going to have to communicate why your business is better than other businesses, because there's lots of alternatives out there. And we'll get into that. So usually the clients will, my clients with SCORE will start with this format and then move forward and grow the information and build on it and change it as they go. There are a couple of no or go-no points in this process. If you can't define your solution to the customer's problem, you probably shouldn't start the business. And your value proposition, if you're not creating value over the next best competitor, then you probably shouldn't get into the business. I've worked with a couple clients on that they couldn't iterate their value over the next best alternative. And then costs. Karen will cover this later, but if your costs don't work, if your solution costs more than the value that it creates, that's a non-starter. You just really, your business model needs to change. So we'll get into some of the details here, but we are just hitting the top layer, and hopefully you can ask some questions. You can get into specifics, and Karen and I will try to address those. And hopefully you'll learn a little bit here along the way. All right, next slide, Karen.
Okay, just before you move on, I mentioned a link earlier for Lean Canvas. This document, as well as the Word document where you can type in your responses, is on our website. So going back to what David just mentioned is that, this will be the first page. On the second page, you'll see all these boxes blank. So if you're interested in even taking a look at them, obviously, please go to our website and.
Karen, I'll attach it to the materials too.
Oh, great. Thank you, Ellen. Much appreciated. Okay.
Great. Real good. Thanks. So number one, what's the problem, the need, or what does your customer want? You really need to put yourself in the customer's place. What's the problem that your product or service or your solution addresses? Like if you're selling cell phones, your solution is communication. It's not necessarily the cell phone. You're selling communication capabilities. Or if you're renting cars, you're selling temporary transportation. You're not selling a rental car. So think about it from the customer's perspective. What's the gap? What's the need that they have? And often you need to ask, is it a one-off need or is it an ongoing need? Are they going to buy weekly or monthly or quarterly? So that's an important piece of the puzzle. So is it just one-off or ongoing issues? And be clear about how your product solves the customer problem. And most importantly, what's the value of that? The customer has to be able to understand the value. And what's unique about your offering? How is it different than the competition? This is an ongoing issue. You can't just be the same as everyone else out there. You've got to have some hook, something that makes it unique. And I use the what, who, what, where, why, and when questions to try to answer these issues. That tends to help me. You know, who has the problem? This is your target market. You really want to get a narrow focus to get started. And then what are the customers doing about that problem now? They've got an ongoing problem. Are they just ignoring it and absorbing the cost? Or are they buying from competitors? So this is something that you need to think about. Where's the problem? Where do customers have to go to get a solution? You know, that's obviously an important one. And we'll talk more about your channels to the market later. And when does a problem exist? Is it ongoing, or is it only when certain situations come up? So those are, you know, that's a good way to look at it. And then why do customers have the problem? Are they doing something to make it a bigger problem than it needs to be? Or are they just coming up with, oh, I really want this? Or is it an ongoing problem that, you know, your customers really need a solution and need to be told about something? Maybe they don't know there's a solution to the problem out there. So one of the clients I had with SCORE, he had a very unique device that made it wall painting quicker and faster and cleaner. And he came to SCORE and was asking for some help. And he had a plan. It was more or less make it and they will come. And I sat down, asked some questions, and we really talked through clarifying what his solution was addressing. What was the problem? It was spilled paint and excess time taken to clean up. So that was the value that his solution would create. And that kind of put a top on what he could charge. He had to charge more than that or less than that, but looking at the value first. So we looked at the competitor products and modified the design so it would be unique. And then we had to understand how painting crews would use that device. And they had to change their processes to benefit. So we fine-tuned the target customers, and his target customers were not everybody that walked into Home Depot or Lowe's. It was only commercial painting crews. They could afford this relatively sophisticated solution because they had the volume of spillage and their time was very, very valuable. So that narrowed his focus. So a business plan of make it and they will come really doesn't work. You need to think through some of the topics we're talking about today, and this will help you focus and articulate what it is that you need to address. All right, next slide. So there's always alternatives. There's existing solutions. It's very, very rare that you come into a market and you're creating something very, very new, like a nuclear power plant. You know, that's something very new. But the alternative would be coal fire plants. So there's other solutions. They're either direct or indirect. So do you know who the key competitors are? You can be a mystery shopper. You can do Google searches in the area. You can pretend to be a customer and ask questions. This is a way to do market research and come up with really useful information on what's being offered in the market today. You can make phone calls. Websites now are just incredible. You can get all kinds of good information off of the websites because people are trying to tout their advantages in the market. Trade shows or farmers markets is a great way to go and talk and touch and feel products and see what's out there and see how people would react to your product. So face-to-face is always a good way to understand what's out there in the market. And you know, the price or the cost of your solution has got to be a key criteria. You got to understand the cost of the problem if it's not solved. So your solution has to come in and create value for the customer, meaning your solution has to be at a lower cost to the customer than them ignoring the problem or the competitors' offerings. So direct competitors offer essentially the same product or service, and indirect offerings are very different. And sometimes they can address the problem or the need in a very different way. Like Southwest Airlines is a good indirect example. When they came to the market, they understood that people can use automobiles and buses. So they saw their competition not as other airlines, but as automobiles and buses. So they had to be easy to use and easy to go on those short flights. So that's an indirect. Another indirect is if you're offering accounting services. Well, your competition is not just other accounting agencies, it's in-house accountants. So you have to understand the customer is weighing the pros and cons of those alternative products. And it's always good to understand the next best alternative. Who leads in the market and what makes them unique? What's their competitive advantage? And I like to use a SWOT analysis. I don't know if anybody's used to that, but SWOT, it's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So you can look at a SWOT of your offering versus each of the competitors and look at your strengths and weaknesses and the opportunities. How do you take advantage of the opportunities? That goes into your strategic planning. And then the threats, you need to look at how are you going to mitigate those threats? What are you going to do to improve what you're offering? So this is a lot of work just to understand the alternatives and market research. So it's a very important critical point to understand where your niche in the market is going to be and how you are unique.
David, question.
Mhm.
So do you always have to underbid or be lower than your competition in order to get business?
Not at all. Your solution has to create more value than the competitors. You look at it from a full cost of ownership situation. You, as an example, you buy a vehicle that is cost $10,000 more, but has fewer repairs. So the full cost of ownership is less than a competitive product that would cost less initially. So looking at it as a full life of ownership is a good way to look at that. And changes in processes. If you're charging for accounting services and you do it in a way that saves them on having to double check it or revise and constantly go back and forth to get the right statements, then you're creating more value than a competitor that might charge less. So look at it from the full cost of ownership.
Thank you, David. And I encourage everyone who's on, please ask questions, even if you think they're, too simple. Nothing's too simple if you're trying to start a business and do your first business plan. And that's what we're here for. So
Right.
I encourage everyone to please ask a question.
Right. I appreciate the questions while we're talking here. And like I say, get specific on your business, your ideas. Really look forward to that. All right. So your solution. This is, we've talked about it a bit, but you need to be very specific on how you're going to solve this customer problem that you've defined. Look at each feature. Is it faster, smaller, bigger? Is it lower in cost? Is it higher quality? How do these things create value? Like safety features on a car. We're paying more for those safety features, and the value that creates, it saves lives and it reduces accident costs. So that's a trade-off that you have to look at in any type of offering to the customer. What does your solution do? And again, look at it versus your competitors. What's better, faster, cheaper? Also look at where your product or solution may not be up to par to the competitors. You're going to have some features that are better and some that may not be as good or just at par. So look at your solution and maybe revise it to create something more unique and something that the client or the customer wants, and they have higher perceived value. And look at it from the whole product and service. It's not just a widget, or you're not just selling the phone. It's all the service that's around that. As an example, I had a SCORE client had a very unique cleaning solution, and it was so good it was hard to believe it was true. So we looked at that solution, and He had a proprietary chemical compound. He could provide the compound and a very innovative delivery system. And he was frustrated that sales weren't growing fast and customers just didn't believe it was that good. So we looked at it and decided that he had to have better documentation of the success of that product. So the documentation was really part of his solution. He had to come up with case histories and in some cases trials for the customer and certified testing. And all of that was part of the solution. He couldn't just say, here, I've got something really good, trust me. So it's taking the full view of your solution is very important. It's the complete solution and from the customer's perception. You know, they really need to understand from what they know about your solution and how they understand the value of it. But sometimes that takes some serious communications. All right, next slide, please. So the value proposition. This is a lot of clients struggle with this. They find it hard to say, you know, how my product creates more value than the value that competitors take to the market. So this is something really to spend some time on. And typically there's only 3 ways to compete. You have something newer or better because of innovation. Another, you can reduce cost. And remember, that's the full cost of ownership from the customer's perspective. And then the third way is you're better or smarter because you're so focused on a small niche in the market. And if you think through, you know, just because your product is newer doesn't mean it creates more value for the customer. Think through that and how are you creating value? And it's good to estimate the dollars that the client will save. You can look at their processes and say, well, perhaps I'm going to cut the time it takes them to paint a wall. Well, okay, what's that time worth? Put dollars to it. And you can always estimate that and then go to customers and say, I'm estimating if I can cut your time in half, that's worth $100 to you. So will you pay me $100 for my solution or less than $100? So it's always good to put real numbers to it, even if it's very, very rough estimates. So on the value proposition, why would a customer buy your solution and not the competitor's solution? Always look at their next best alternative. I find it really useful to create a table of each of the features on your product or service. And how do those features create value for the customer? So the value proposition is a story. It's like Karen said earlier, it's always best to tell a story about what you're offering. So the story kind of goes like this. When a customer has this problem, they can use our product to do this or that. And then when they do that, our product is cheaper or it's at lower cost to the customer themselves. So it's that story on how the customer uses the product to create value. So I've got a couple examples that where they've really refined their value proposition. Uber is a really good example. Their value proposition is it's the smartest way to get around. Short and sweet, and that's a great way to say that's how I create value. It's the smartest way to get around. Or the Apple iPhone. Pretty much everyone has those, but the experience is the product. That's what they claim to be their value proposition. And then I don't know if you know about the Freedom Boat Club, but I've been a member for a while. But their tagline is own the water, not the boat. And that's really how they create value, because you don't have to own a boat to enjoy the water. So this is something that, like I said, my clients tend to struggle with a bit. So are there any questions on this? Specific questions?
Nothing right now, so we can just keep moving along.
Okay, real good. All right, next slide. All right. You always hear the target market or the target customer. This is where you get real specific. And the reason for that is you need to target your communications. It's kind of the difference between a shotgun and a rifle. You want to zero in on those customers and really communicate to them in a language they understand. Like sushi. Everybody eats food, but not everybody eats sushi. So you need to refine how you communicate to the target market by saying, well, sushi, it's for people that want a healthy meal. They're willing to pay for it. They appreciate the taste and the quality, the presentation. And that's a very different target market than McDonald's or Burger King, as you just have to alter how you communicate. So for business to consumer, you need to look at your product or service. Is it business to consumer or business to business? And for consumers, you can kind of use demographics, segments of the population, age, sex, income, education, race, geographical locations. But business to business is very different. You've got to really understand the industries that they're in and what creates value in those industries, and then segment the market in that way. There's a whole school of thought and training and on business to business buying processes. A good way to think about this are persona. This is something new in the marketing world that you kind of, what's your dream customer? Think about who, what's the best person that could create the most value if they bought my product or service. And you can actually give these people a name. Like if your target market is working moms with multiple children, that describes a lot of people, but your persona might be hectic Helen, just so that you understand that's your target, or career-oriented young professionals. Everybody calls those yuppies, or now we're looking at millennials. But these are all different ways of how they buy in the market, and they have different needs in the market. So it's good to understand their buying behaviors. Are they buying on cost or perceived quality, or are they looking at the full cost of ownership, where they look like they can keep your product and service working for much longer than the competitors' products? So how do they derive value from your product? Always consider that. And like I said, there's a whole field of study on this, and just look at it from the customer's perspective, but define your target market, because in your business plan, you're wanting to communicate to your investors, your potential partners, and to your customers. So having them understand that you understand who exactly is buying your product and why, that's a big part of your business plan. So
David, we have a question. How far afield from a geography standpoint should you start planning a target market when you're just starting off?
Oh boy, yeah, just starting, as most of our viewers are today. Usually I work with my clients to focus, look at the local area and try to understand how to succeed in the local area, then go regional. You can look, low country or Southeastern US, then the US, and then international. Rarely have I seen where people go the other way and sell international first, but I do know of a couple people that's how they've been very successful, because their specific product created more value in selling to countries as opposed to companies in the US for various reasons. So good question, but usually it's local, regional, US, and then global.
Yeah, and then I agree with David. It goes back to what your product or service is. And obviously, if it's a very, very specific product that obviously goes online sales, versus retail sales, obviously you might expand your geography, but keep it tight, as I mentioned earlier. Otherwise, you could be spending a lot of time advertising in places that aren't going to get traction right away. So,
Exactly.
and
Exactly.
again, I encourage people to please ask you questions, but okay, David, that's what we got for now.
Okay. All right. The next one, please. All right. Elevator pitch. Everybody's heard of Shark Tank, and they give a pretty good pitch that they've refined and worked on for years, usually in Shark Tank. But, you know, in your business plan, we've defined the problem to be addressed. We've defined your solution. We've defined the product benefits, defined the value created. We've defined your target customers. Now we do the hard part. What's the summary pitch to communicate all of this in 30 seconds? So you try to vision, you're riding up with the key decision maker for a big deal. And you got 3 floors going up the elevator. You got 30 seconds to talk to the guy. What do you say? And this is always a difficult one. Winston Churchill, he was well known for his very persuasive powers. He has a very famous quote that I just love to quote it. But he was asked how long it takes him to prepare a speech. Simple question, right? He says, it depends. If I have 10 minutes to speak, I need about a week to prepare. If I've got 15 minutes, I can do it in probably 2 or 3 days. If I have an hour, I'm ready now. So to whittle all this good information down to 30 seconds, it'll take you weeks and perhaps months. Practice with people. Are you able to communicate your product, what you're doing about it, and the value it creates in 30 seconds? It's a good exercise, and it will be very valuable to you in starting your business to be able to catch people's attention, because that's what this is all about. It's not to inform them about everything about your business. It's to catch their attention. So consider the target for the pitch. Just like the full business plan, you need to talk about investors. That's a Shark Tank. They're up there. They're going to provide financial aid for your product or not. So that's good. But also partners. A lot of times, particularly in small businesses just getting started, you may need to partner with someone else that provides a complementary product or service, or just convince somebody to get your product on the storefront. So there's lots of pitches. It's not just investors, it's potential partners, and then pitching for potential customers. When you walk in the door, what's the first sentence that you say? So again, this is very, very important. And it kind of takes a format. Hi, I'm so-and-so, I'm with this company. I help these specific customers with this specific need so they can succeed and save money or save time or create value in some way. This is very, very important, because you're going to have hundreds of times to give your pitch, your elevator speech, and then catch their attention. And then you've got a chance to go into the more detail. So this is an important piece. All right. Next slide, please.
We just have one question. Okay, someone was asking for resources they could recommend to vendors, and we will answer that offline just so that we can keep moving along. So anyway, so next slide. There we go. Okay.
All right. Yeah, towards that end, there's just a wealth of information on the Lowcountry SCORE website, but also on the national SCORE website. These seminars are recorded, and there's a whole library of seminars. You can search by topic. It's amazing, the wealth of information out there. So please have a look at our websites. And if you need some help navigating the websites, you can get a mentor to help you with that too. So we're here to help. Sales channels. This is always a good topic. If you know your targeted customer and how they're understanding the value you can create, then you come up with the best channel on how to sell to those customers. You've got online businesses, distributors, retail storefronts, brick and mortar. It really depends on the type of product or service that you're offering and the types of buyers you're serving. There's no one best way. That's why there's lots of different methods. You know, most of my clients now, unless it's a kind of a business to consumer type of service, they're heavy into the digital marketing, digital footprint, and online sales. Getting onto Amazon is relatively easy. I had one of my clients, it took him a few months because of all the documentation that Amazon asked for, but that's a very viable way to get out there for relatively simple products that can be shipped anywhere in the world. Then you talk about where do you have distribution centers and those types of things. But those are good problems if you get the volume to have those kinds of questions. So if you're selling a simple commodity, like I say, online, or you can work through distributors, again, that have kind of common or complementary products. That's always good. If you've got an innovative new solution, you may need to go direct sales so that you have the time to interact with potential customers and teach them how that solution addresses the problems that they have. And that communication is always good for you to understand their problems, to make sure that your solution actually addresses the problems that you thought your potential customers had. So that's a important one. Also, you might want to partner with a value-added reseller so that they have the expertise to explain the value that your product or service brings. And it's always good to have at least two channels. Don't just plan on one channel. You can start with one channel, but as soon as you can afford to create that other channel, it's kind of like the value of diversification in a portfolio. You're always learning and you're always understanding how best to take your product to market. It can always be improved. So it's a constantly learning. It's not a one and done approach. So sales channels, there's lots of options. And this is something that you really can talk to some people and get some good input before you make a decision on this. All right. Next slide, please. The marketing plan. This is where you kind of put it all together on describing your strategic choices on how you want to position your product and how you want to communicate to your target market. So it's, again, this is a living document, and some people kind of talk through the business plans or marketing plans are very similar. In this lean canvas, the marketing plan is just that, positioning and communicating. So there's a famous marketing guru that defined position. I picked this up decades ago, but it's the physical location in a customer's mind compared to the competition. You think about physically in your brain, different from the competition. And you can think of Apple versus Samsung. You know, they're in different locations in your brain. And that's the positioning that they've done through their marketing campaigns and their promotional. Or Tesla versus Ford, very different positions in the market. Ford's brought out their F-150 Lightning truck. You know, their platinum version of that is close to $100,000. So I think Ford is changing their position with that one vehicle, but it'll take them a long time to really change that customer perception of their position in the market. Typically, you go to the 4 P's of marketing for positioning: price, place, product, and promotion. Always think through those 4 P's. And again, the price is always the full cost of ownership and the cost of changing, because they're using something now. The customer has to change, and there's typically a changeover cost there. And the place, where will your product be available and how will it be used? The product, how are you differentiated from the competition? And promotion, how do you communicate with the customers and your partners? Amazon spent $17 billion on promotion. There's a lot of different ways to promote your product, and they've probably done every way imaginable to spend $17 billion. But there's lots of options, and these options are different than your sales channels. These are communications or promotional channels. And you've got your digital options, Facebook, Google, you've got blogs and email blasts. And I think Karen just brought up Nextdoor. These are digital ways to get your message out. And again, you need to be short and sweet with how does your product unique in the market and what's the value it brings. You don't need to tell all the specifications, just what's the value. And then the print options, magazines or flyers, business cards. I've had several of my clients that didn't yet have business cards. That's a cheapest print version of advertising as you can have. So just a simple business card, how to get the word out on your business card. A lot of those business cards are almost free, to get started. Direct contact's another way to communicate. Trade shows or local fairs or the farmers market. I've been to the Hilton Head Farmers Market and the Bluffton Farmers Market multiple times. There's lots of products out there and some new products, and several of my customers have gone to those fairs and made good contacts and started their customer base at these farmers markets. So another face-to-face used to be door-to-door. I guess you probably can't do that anymore, but that's another face-to-face option. So the best option for your product is kind of going to depend on your available budget and who your target market is. So again, the business plan is kind of like, or the marketing plan is kind of like your business plan. It's a living document. It helps you define your path forward and lets you celebrate the progress that you're making. So I think I can take some questions now. The next few slides, Karen's going to talk through. She's going to look at the dollars and cents. So if there's any questions.
Yeah, there's no questions at now. The only thing I would mention here is we do have an entire marketing workshop coming up, and you'll see that at the end as part of the veteran series. So we will get a much deeper dive into some of these if you are interested, because one of the key things that is coming up now for marketing is use of videos. It's amazing how much now people want to see and not just hear or read your pitch online. So, that has, you think of TikTok and all these other things that may not be appropriate for your business, but obviously using a video and putting it out there on YouTube might make all the difference in the world, especially if you have a specialty product.
Yeah. Good.
Okay, so let's go on to obviously a topic that sometimes makes people's eyes glaze over. This goes into the last segment of the lean canvas, which is the financial side. And again, if you are interested in more details, I will be giving a full in-depth how do you review your financials or create your financials for business on another workshop. So here we're just going to touch the high points. One question I always ask my clients when we start working is this, as I mentioned earlier, are you going to live on this money? Do you have to pay your rent? Which then gets to, well, how are you going to generate the cash to do that and how much cash you need to do that? And while normally we follow the sequence in looking at business plans as is set out in the lean canvas, sometimes for certain clients, I work backwards. And the reason is because they need to understand that can they make the money they think they're going to make based on the product and pricing that they're going to offer. So asking the questions of how you're going to generate cash, the price to find your customer, are you going to be on the low end or the high end? Or if something you have is going to save them so much time, and I think David's point was so appropriate, that if it's going to save them time, how do you quantify that? Time is money when you're a business person. And if you're selling business to business, it's different from business to individual. Charge appropriately for day one. I don't know how many people who just underbid just to get a job. So if you're a landscaper and the typical pricing is $100 to do a mowing of a lawn for, a month. Well, and you charge 75, it's very hard to get that customer to $100. And we'll talk a bit more of how you look at that from a cost standpoint. You need to consider your price and as part of your product and services. And you have to quantify your income in far as sales per month and serviceable hours. I had another client in which when we tried to figure it out at the end of the day, they would have to have put in 500 serviceable hours in a month based on their pricing to make sense to cover their costs. Well, there isn't 500 hours in a month. So you need to rethink that. So how much will you sell? What is your estimate over a 12-month scheme? And I go with certain of my clients, I actually do a month-to-month analysis to say, okay, if you start off small and then work your way up, what does that mean? Because one of the important parts is your costs. First, you have to think of startup costs. Again, this is one of the downfalls I have with some of my clients. They don't think of how much money they need to start. You might have to buy equipment. You might have to buy chemicals to make this cleaning fluid. You obviously need insurance. You've got to get your licenses, both in obviously the various cities, state, and counties where you reside. What are those one-time costs? Quantify them, put them in black and white, then turn around and say, how am I paying for it? So if you think you have $5,000 in the bank account and that's going to be more than enough to get you started, think again. There are your fixed costs. These are costs in which you've got to pay whether you make $1 or $100,000. And that has to go with obviously, a lease, your electric bill, any type of equipment rental. That's salaries. If you're going to have an employee and, let's take my landscaper, and you need one person to work with you, well, that person's going to want their salary regardless of whether you're mowing one lawn or 100 lawns. Then you move on to variable costs. And this is where it goes back to is, okay, if I'm making, cabinetry, is obviously I will buy the wood to make the cabinets and the hardware and whatever else when I have the order. So what is that cost? Going back to the next point, cost of goods sold. What is my cost as it is relative to making the cabinet? Other variable costs that might come up is going back to marketing. We just talked about that. How much do you want to spend on boosting your Facebook? How much do you want to spend on print ads or radio or other means of getting it? The flyers that you have out there. Again, you don't have to do those, but you might need to do those to get them ready. And then obviously cost to provide the service. You need to think through your labor costs and other costs. Well, how are you doing this all by yourself, or are you having help at the end of the day? All very important component pieces to go through this. And I know I'm going through these quickly because to go into them in detail, I really do encourage you to obviously go into obviously the next workshop, which we'll talk about. What is your business objectives and are your goals being met? So this way it goes back to the plan we'll put together in your mind to say, okay, I need to have 100 clients by the end of September. Are those critical, to your goals? But if you're able to charge more, maybe I need 50. They are constantly changing because you have to react to what's going on in the marketplace. Quantify it, both short-term and long-term, because, as I mentioned, you're the chief cook and bottle washer. You're doing everything. So unless you've got this, I have one client who hates the computer and does everything on whiteboards or stickies all over them. So she puts a sticky on her computer and says, I need to have this many sales by this date. And every day she's sitting at the computer, she's looking at her short-term sales goal. That's how she operates. And then when she looks at her numbers and she sees she's not there, you have to adjust. So what are the metrics that make sense for you, both from a sales and a number standpoint and marketing, as well as your operations? If it's you, that's one thing. If you've got other people to help you, then it obviously is a different thing you have to manage going through. And what will you do differently going back to if you underperform? If you're expecting to have 50 sales and you only have 20, well, what do I do? How do I get there? Maybe I got to do more marketing. Maybe I've got to put another pitch. Maybe I've got to do more, David mentioned going to farmers markets or going to trade shows. Maybe there's a different way in which you've got to spend, unfortunately, some time and money at the end of the day. This is not easy being a business owner. You're on your own and it takes work and it takes adjusting and being able to change quickly. So highly recommend that you put down what are your key risks to your business. Is that, managing your costs? Because as we know, price of everything is going up. So I was talking to one of our other clients recently who's at the farmers market here in Bluffton, and her biggest challenge is trying to get the cost. She sells gluten-free bakery products. Lovely lady. But she said the cost of everything is going up. And of course, when you go to a farmer's market, if someone is selling you a muffin and it's $3 and the person next to is $4, well, unless I know that $4 is worth it, I'll spend the $4. If not, I'll buy the $3 muffin. So her biggest risk is that, well, people love her product, is keeping her costs under control. What is your next important task? This is where set your priorities. You cannot do everything at once. Otherwise, the next phone call in which there's a problem, there's an issue, becomes your priority. Know what your priorities are when you're doing a business plan. Know where things are going to, obviously, things are going to get hung up at the end of the day, and make that your focus. Don't try to do everything all at once. And honestly, this is where if you have or want to have a SCORE mentor comes in handy. I have clients who are constantly going off tangent on various things, or someone's trying to sell them something and they're saying, oh, I think this is a good idea. I said, but is this going to accomplish what you want? Is it going to take that next task off your list and move from there? It is very important to have that third-party person sometime to bring you back to your reality and what you really want. So highly encourage that at the end of the day. So what did we cover? They say it's a one-page planning tool. Agree with David. It probably turns into 2 or 3 by the time you get the details done. It really helps you understand your whole business. You look at the forest, not just the trees at the end of the day. You see your potential opportunities and pitfalls, and hopefully that highlights to say, I really don't know who my client is or what geography they're in. Let's work through it and get down to those details. Gets you to plan ahead. It minimizes surprises and prepares for success. And I know we're running a few minutes over and we're almost there. Here are important resources. Again, these are live links you will be getting as part of the presentation at the end of the day. And any questions, David?
I don't see any other questions, and I just hope we can get some feedback on this, and hope we've planted a few nuggets out there that people can use as they start their business or grow their business.
Okay, so with that, let me go through the last slides. This series has been renamed the John Ferrara Veteran Entrepreneur Series. A near and dear mentor who actually started this veteran workshop series several years ago just passed away, and we're all saddened at the end of the day. So as you can see, as I mentioned, our next series is a social media at the end of it. After that, we're going to do the beginner's guide to understanding business financials. I will be doing that, and that's why I will be going into much more details at the end of the day. How to get financing for your business is we're going to have both the SBA and someone from Bank of America talk about what you need to do to get financing. And our last of the series is going to be a Veterans Roundtable, where you can ask actual people who started businesses at the end of the day. Then we move on to, we have a social media series. We did the first 2, which is Facebook and TikTok. The next 2 is LinkedIn and Pinterest. Now that you've signed up for this, you will be getting these emails. And if you're interested, please sign up. We have a QuickBooks series every year. We've done 3. And again, if you want the recording of any of the ones that we have already passed and you didn't attend, please obviously send an email to Ellen Maloney. You see her email on here and she will send you the recording. But we have 2 more. How do you do invoicing and reporting on QuickBooks coming up? We have a nonprofit series. We did the first 2. We'll be doing the rest of them in October, and they will be dealing. So if you have anyone or anyone in your family obviously involved with a nonprofit, this is a great series to obviously help you along the way. I mentioned earlier, it is invaluable in my mind as a business owner to have someone to bounce ideas off of. Family is great, but you need that third-party perspective. So if you want a mentor, please obviously come and reach out to us. Go onto our website. You'll find a button that says find a mentor and go from there. If you want to be a volunteer, here are all the roles that we have. We also have a role that we're looking for someone to help us to be a webmaster as well, besides graphic designs. So we have people behind the scenes and in front of the scenes. So you can see all the great graphics and the presentation. We have 2 wonderful people who put this together for us. I couldn't do this to save my life as far as doing any of these at this point. And here is all of our social media sites at the end of the day. We can obviously go from there. I'm just looking, I see there's some questions out here. As I mentioned, you will be getting, now that you've signed up for this workshop, you will be getting emails on all the workshops. And obviously, if you have any questions, please feel free. You have our emails in this presentation, both David and myself, and you'd be more than happy. And last but not least, I have to say thank you to Bank of America. We couldn't do this without them, and they've been a great sponsor. And lastly, we are a resource partner and the boots on the ground for obviously the SBA at the end of the day. But we are here for you. If you need a mentor, whether we are here in the Lowcountry, I know some of you are in other locations, please just go to your local score.org, find a mentor, put in your zip code, and they will find someone locally and close by. And it looks like we don't have any other questions. So with that, I know we're a few minutes over. Thank you for staying with us, and hopefully we'll see you on the next one. Have a good day.
Good luck with it.